Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazadov's chess channel and welcome to our French defense series. So in this series we're covering some variations and some sidelines that can happen to you in this very nice and static opening, and today we're continuing our series with the so-called advanced variation of the French defense. So in my previous video we have talked about the exchange variation, so I don't think that we should cover more videos about the exchange variation. So as I said in my previous video, you shouldn't go with white into exchange variations. So you should really try to keep the dynamics on the board, to keep really complex position, because when we have complex position then we have of course opportunities to win the game, because the exchange variation is really the most rawish played chess games ever. So today, as I said, the advanced variation, it's similar to the classical or the normal variation of the French defense, but there are differences. There are advantages and disadvantages for both sides, because there are strategical and positional problems for white when we advance the pawn on e5 immediately. So let's check out now this variation and the problems about this setup. So e4, of course, e6, the French, we have d4, and after d5 we have now the move e5. The classical variation that we have analyzed was with knight to c3 and knight to f6, followed with e5. Now we are delaying the move of the knight. We play the move e5 immediately. So there is a huge difference now for black, because in some occasions you saw that black played the move knight to f6 after the potential move e5. Black maneuvered the knight to d7 and had a very nice support of the potential c5 move. So now there is this problem for black, where to go with the knight. So the most natural way for black in these positions is to proceed with knight to e7 and knight to f5. Black would love to cement the knight on f5. If black manages to create a blocking system, it means maybe with knight to f5, h5, and maybe h4, never allow maybe white to kick away this knight from f5. I believe that black could have a comfortable game. But what white should do here is to keep really a compact center position. So it means black will attack the center immediately with the move c5. That's the problem, because in this classical or normal variation we had the opportunity to advance the pawn on f4, support our e5 pawn. Now it's not possible, because black hasn't played with knight, black hasn't participated in the attack on the center. So now the c5 move is already a risky move. So today we'll analyze the variation after potential knight to e7, but I wanted to remind again about the common strategies of the French defense. We have talked about these ideas also in the classical or normal variation. So as I always like to say, we have first of all a closed position. So it means when we have closed positions, sometimes, not always, but you should always try to find your good ways with your knights into the game, because the knights are of course very good in close position, because the knights are always changing the color of the square that are jumping. So that's why you should try to keep your knights on the board. What we also said, with we have the so-called directed attacks. Let's remind us, as I said, I've mentioned now this many times, but maybe someone is watching my series for the first time, so I wanted to repeat again. We have the so-called directed attack, so it means white will coordinate the attack on the king side, because the pawns are showing us the direction. Here black is of course will attack on the queen side, because the pawns are also showing us the direction of that attack. So what we've also talked about, that the tactical problems are in the center. So it means that something will probably happen around this c5, maybe here f5, maybe even around e6. So the tactics will probably happen here somewhere in the center, not on the side of the board. So what we also talked about is this opposite side attack game. As I said, we're attacking on opposite sides, and favorable trades of pieces are also very important, because when we watch the pawn structure in the center, it means that we have now many pawns on dark squares. So this dark square problem, this dark square bishop of white could have problems in the game. On the other hand, black's light square bishop will probably have problems to activate itself. So that's why, from black's perspective, it could be a good idea to give up maybe this bad bishop on c8 for this bishop on f1. But as I said, I've talked about these ideas many times in my French defense so far. So in order to get a better understanding, please watch the series from the first video, then the second, and so on. So Let's see now the ideas for white and for black of this advanced variation. So here black continues, of course, as I said, we have the directed attack. Black is immediately attacking the center with the move c5. The instructive game that I wanted to show you today, it's a game played by Thug Life Alexander Grischuk against Teimur Radjabov. Teimur played here the move c5, we have c3, so we should fix our center with this pawn, and now after queen to b6, the common idea is of course knight to f3. So here knight to c6, played by Radjabov. He attacks of course the center further, and we have now a3. This is a very important move because we are not allowing this bishop after potential c takes d4 to get on b4 and attack our king. Then we could cover with some piece, maybe knight to d2, but then our d4 pawn would be hanging. So here in the game, a knight to h6 can be an idea. So my recommendation is here to go immediately b4. We're cracking the position. We're not allowing some expansion on the queen side. This b4 move is a very, very nice idea of white to block black's progress on the queen side. So b4, very necessary move. After c takes d, we have c takes d4, and now knight to f5. As I said, black will probably try this idea to cement the knight on f5, but the problem for black is that this knight can be still kicked away. So here bishop to b2, played by Alexander Grischuk. Very important move. We shouldn't of course lose our d4 pawn. So now bishop to d7, and now g4. Don't be scared, play this move. As I said, our attack is on the king side from white's perspective. It's not a problem, but you cannot leave this knight hanging here. The knight cannot stay on this very active square on f5 longer. So here in the game, Teimur tried knight to e7, and now knight to c3. The idea behind this move, knight to c3, is also a common idea to maybe get our knight to a4 and then maybe to c5. So here knight to a5 here played by Radjabov, very nice idea. If you take, of course, you lose the bishop on b2. In the game, knight to d2 was played, and now rook to c8. We have rook to c1, and as I said also in my previous videos of this classical or advanced variation, there are this king in the center position, so we can stay really with our kings a little bit further in the center, because nothing can happen. The center is closed. Most of the times when you see that your opponent is staying too long in the center, then you should open the center somehow and attack the king. But so far you see with this blocked pawn structure, this d4 e5 setup and e6 d5 setup, so far it's not possible somehow to open the center. We could maybe in long terms try some moves like f4, f5. So in the game here, knight to g6 was played by Radjabov, and we have now h4. Very important move to attack here this knight. The knight cannot stay again on this very active square. In the game, bishop to e7 was played, and now g5. We have h6, g takes h6, rook takes h6, and now h5. So we have made progress. I believe that white is faster here in the attack. In the game, knight to h4 was played by Grischuk, by Radjabov, and now queen to g4, attacking the knight. We have knight to f5, again the cementing idea, but now bishop to d3. Very, very important move, because if you take, for instance, queen to d4, then we get bishop takes f5, the queen is hanging. If you take the queen on g4, then we can recapture with the bishop. So if you take with the knight here, then you have some problems here around this g7 square. So that's why bishop to f8 was played, and now knight to e2 played by Grischuk. You see how Grischuk is protecting his center. Okay, there are maybe some tactical threats on the c file, but you see black has problems to include some other pieces in the attack. We have knight to c4, we have knight takes c4, d takes c4, and now bishop takes f5. This is a very important move now to get rid of this knight. As I said, in some occasions we could go into this positional trade of pieces. After e takes f5, we have queen to g2, and now there are ideas, of course, to play f4 and now d5 to get these two pawns advanced on the 5th rank, and here white has really a comfortable game. Although with the king in the center, but still this is really playable for white, because after a5, okay, we have bishop to c3. You see, we're not allowing black to somehow get into the game. In the game, Radjabov tried a takes b4, and here a takes b4, rook to a8, and now this idea d5. I'm not going to show you the whole game. This is now, I believe, a good position here for white. We have still opportunities. Knight to f4. We can always find a way into the game for this knight. If bishop to b4 happens, then rook to b1 can be very, very annoying. After bishop takes c3, knight takes c3, the rook is protected. But again, I really like this pawn-centric control that we have built here. This is again a bad bishop position. As I said, in this French defense, you should always search for positional trades of pieces. Now this knight, I believe, is much better than this bishop on d7, and it was really a comfortable game here for Grischuk. Although the game was prolonged for like 90 moves, it was really a positional struggle, a positional battle, but Grischuk won this game very effectively. So let's see now another example. It's a game played by Dominguez Perez Liner and against Ildar Ibragimov. Again, this advanced variation. After c5, we have c3, knight to c6, here knight to f3, and now comes this idea knight to e7. When that happens, so if your opponent doesn't play the move queen to b6, then you have a very important move, because the idea of blacks here is to play a very fast knight to f5. If you play g5 or g4 in order to prevent this idea, that's a very important thing. Then you meet a very tricky move, h5. So you're forced now to do something. If you play g takes h5, then this rook comes very active into the game. We have some problems on the h file, although black cannot castle. But as I said, in these positions, in these block pawn structures in the center, you shouldn't take care of your king so much. It's not an endangered king position. Now I think that black has a comfortable game. And if you pass through here, for instance, if you play g5, then black can play on this main idea knight to f5, and then after potential maybe bishop to d3, then to fix the position with the move g6, and black has fixed the position on the king side. Black can even castle on that side. I'm not seeing a good way how white should open the position on the king side, so that's why here I recommend you another line which is better. After the move knight to e7, what you should notice is that this bishop is now blocked out. So that's the most important thing. That's why we have the opportunity to play knight to a3. This is the line that I'm suggesting you, because now we have the opportunity to play the move knight to c2 and again further protect our center on d4. So here c takes d4, c takes d4, knight to f5. Okay, it's of course a direct attack on this weak square on d4, but now knight to c2. This is a very important maneuver that you should memorize. After this knight to e7 idea of blacks, we have queen to b6 and now bishop to bishop to d3. Knight takes d4 is not a possibility, because after trades of knights, then we would have a discovered attack. Let's see the possible continuation. Knight takes d4. We can simply take knight takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4. But after queen takes d4, we have now bishop to b5, the discovered attack. So that's why black has to do something here. Black has to regroup in the game. Bishop to d7 was played, and now castling. So now our center is protected. We don't have any troubles in the game. a5 was played, and now bishop takes f5. Again, this idea to double up pawns to get now our knight into the game. After e takes f5, knight to e3. We have bishop to e6, and you see now this bishop is only used as a defensive piece. It's basically part of the pawn chain. I've seen now also some expression, this is just a tall pawn. It was written by one of my subscribers. I really liked this expression. It's really just a tall pawn. So great thinking process here by one of my subscribers. He mentioned that his chess coach taught him this expression. Really, this bishop on e6 is simply just a pawn. It's not participating in any attacks. It's not developed. It's really only used as a part of the pawn chain. So now we could go here very positionally, g3. It's not about now to show you this game move per move, because now, as I said, we have the main strategy. Our main strategy of the directed attack is to create an attack on the king side. So our center is protected. Black, I don't think that cannot do so much here on the queen side, because first of all, we have this symmetrical pawn structure here. So I'm not seeing a good way how you could create maybe here a minority attack or a majority attack, because the pawn count is equal on the queen side. So that's why it's not a problem here, I think, to handle the position from white's perspective. So knight to g2, very nice maneuver. Knight to f4 ideas, knight to h5. Here h6, we have h4. We can do that because, as I said, our advantage is on the king side, because this pawn is on the e file and also on the 5th rank. It creates this attack on that side of the board. So here is our territory where we should attack. Here, this side of the board. Castling played by black, and now knight to f4. We have rook to c8, and now rook to e1. Rook to c7, and now rook to e2. Again, protecting simply our pawn, now with ideas to finally somehow open the position. In the game, rook to c8 was played, and now bishop to e3. The position is really fixed now. In the game, knight to b4 was played, and now knight to e1. Very important move to restrict this knight's ability to play on a very active square c2. In the game, queen to b5, a3, knight to a6, and now knight to d3. Again, we have opportunities, if the position allows it, to maybe cement our knight on a weak square on c5. So far it's not possible. The c5 is very well protected. But now a4, we have rook to d2, here bishop to f8, and now comes really a great move here by white, g4. As I said, always search for ideas how to attack on the king side, because that's the side that you should attack. Here in the game, bishop to d7 was played. If you try, for instance, f takes g4, then knight takes e6, followed with queen takes g4, and it's already a very risky position here for black. So that's why, as I said, bishop to d7 was played. But now we can crack the position. Finally, we can split pawns in front of the king. G5, h takes g5, h takes g5, now g6. But again, it leaves now the opportunity to get the queen very active into the game. Now we have queen to h3, king to g2, rook to h1. Really great opportunities to attack the king on the h file. Bishop to e6, king to g2, we have rook to c4, and now rook to h1, knight to c7, rook to d1. You see how these bishops are really blocked out. That's what I always like from white's perspective. When you've played the French defense, you can always go into this positional trade of pieces. Here, rook to h4, queen to d7, and now simply doubling up rooks. Here, after queen to d8, queen to g3, we have knight to b5, and now rook to h7, knight takes d4. Not a problem, because we have now queen to h4, and in this position, black resigns. So, as I said, this is really important. So there are basically these two ideas of blacks. Queen to b6 should be met really with this common knight to f3 idea, then after it with a3, b4 ideas. If your opponent plays something like knight to e7, then you should go into this knight to a3, knight to c7 line. So that's very important, I think, to recognize, because first of all, we want always to paralyze the queen side. That's the side that black will attack. I hope that you realize these ideas. After this potential knight to c6 and a3, you see Grischuk played here b4. Very important move. Now, again, I'm not seeing a clear way how black should attack here this center. You see, you need more pieces that are attacking. So here, it's a risky line maybe, but as I said, it's a great positional line that you can go into favorable continuation, because we have always here the flexibility in the game. We can always do something on the king side, and you see in this position white managed to even to triple the rooks and the queen here on the h file, to triple really this heavy artillery on the h file, and created a checkmate threat. So here in this line, as I said, after knight to e7, try knight to a3, followed with knight to c2. Okay, I hope that you realize these ideas, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more about the French defense, check out my whole series. Here's the link. And if you have troubles to play against d4, you can check out my King's Indian and Nimzo Indian defense series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.